We've got a guest speaker this morning. Chris Navitsky, the Lake George Waterkeeper, is here, and he's going to make a short presentation for us. With that, Chris, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. I'm here really to talk about a new publication that we put out. Al asked if I had any handouts, and this is going to be rather informal, but we do have one. We want to put one of these in everybody's hand. It's a campaign that we are currently working on with the Waterkeeper and my parent organization, the Fund. We'll leave a stack here, and feel free to get up and grab them if you want. But we just want to walk this through. You know, a lot of times we do a lot of presentations around the lake and work with homeowners, work with associations like yourself, and you know, on ways to improve water quality, to give them information on the state of the lake and how we can improve it. And I think your organization really needs to be recognized for that. I think you guys have stepped up with the work that you did on the rain garden, the start of your buffers. These are important aspects that we have in this book and we talk about. So I'll keep this kind of brief. I'm sure you got other stuff to go through and it's too nice to be in the clubhouse. But in this, we really talk about what a watershed is and how everybody's property, whatever we do, our actions can impact the lake. We can do it in a minor process, or it can be more significant. And whenever we grade, whenever we disturb, and we all need to build, we all live here, we've been called anti-development, we're not known. Lake George is this beautiful, special place, and the development and our treatment of our watershed needs to be at that equal level, and that's what we really try to come across in this. So we're not saying you can't build, there's just a right way and a way that we can minimize our impacts, and that's what we're really trying to talk to people about. So we all live in the watershed. We need to respect the different aspects of the watershed. Everything from the soils are very important because they absorb the runoff, they allow the water to filter in, they cleanse the water, the microbiological activities in there. The trees are very important. They intercept the rain, their roots draw it up. So these are all aspects, even the topography, the way water moves through the landscape, the humps and hollows. When we grade and we smooth areas out, runoff increases, and with it, it carries the nutrients and pollutants that impact the lake, that can cause the algae, which we're aware of is happening along here and everywhere along the lake. That's another job that we do. We go around and document that. So the first probably third of this book, we talk about a watershed, we talk about the changes to a watershed and how it develops stormwater runoff, and that's a big problem. Stormwater, whenever we make these changes, we get more runoff, that carries the nutrients, that develops the algae. Well, what's the big deal about algae? Well, but the problem is that with algae, that grows and it becomes part of the food system, and there's always some algae, but when you get too much, then that starts dying off to the bottom of the lake. We have the little bacteria that eat the algae. The bacteria draw the oxygen out of the water, and for the last 25 years, in the very southern part of the lake, there's actually a dead zone in the deepest spot of the lake, down near Lake George Village, where the bacteria draw the oxygen out of the water to such levels that the fish cannot live there. And those are the cold water fish, the trout and the salmon, that go down to the deeper ends of the lake, so deeper waters of the lake. So that is why it's important to really address stormwater, to really knock down our nutrients and what we put into the lake, put into our properties that eventually wind up in the lake. And I think, as I said, your rain garden will go very far for that. Your shoreline buffer helps, and those are aspects. So the other part of the book that we really like, we named it Do-It-Yourself Water Quality, because this is something that everybody can do. We wanted to give people educational information on what they can do on their property. So we break it down. We talk about planning your property well. You know, you can make decisions. Again, you can keep your property forested and minimize your lawns. You know, when we have more lawns, we tend to have a little bit more lawn care, then we tend to have some fertilizers and pesticides, and all of this can accumulate and impact it. These are your decisions. We like to maintain, again, that natural flow pattern of water through your property. That minimizes the runoff, promotes the infiltration, and that's why the water quality is so exceptional around Lake George, is because of the soils, because of the topography and the ability to infiltrate. We have a section on rain gardens. I think we're preaching to the choir here, but again, that'll give you a little bit more information. It's very important to get those native plants. I'm sure Pat knows a lot more about that than me, but to allow that water to infiltrate and allow the nutrients to be taken up naturally, very important. We have a section on septic systems. Don't think it applies much to your association, with the sewer system around, but very important when people maintaining their own septic systems and knowing where they are. You'd be surprised how many people don't know where their septic system is. If you don't, then obviously you're not going to be pumping out. The next section we have is on shoreline buffers and the importance of the shoreline buffer. It obviously is what I like to say your last defensive runoff to the lake. Again, the strength of the root systems strengthens and reduces the erosion potential. Again, the nutrient uptake by the roots, slowing down the water. It doesn't run right into the lake, but there's that last chance of absorption. Another thing that we have found, actually a couple of weeks ago, I think it was about 3 weeks ago in the Times of Thai, somebody wrote a letter in that they finally found out how to take care of geese. And that was they allowed grass to grow up to a particular height. I like to say above the height of a fox, because if a geese cannot see in and cannot see its predators, it's not going to cross that line. So that is another benefit of having a shoreline buffer, is to deter the geese. So we think that that's a benefit. The other thing that we've seen as we've gone around the lake, wherever we see the lawns to the lake scenario, we see a lot of seawalls. And again, that is due to the stronger root systems of the more established plants being taken away, and you have a lot more erosion, not only from the land to the lake, but the wave actions and the ice actions on the shoreline. When you don't have those root systems, that's going to lead to the erosion and loss of the shoreline, and that's why you tend to build it up with seawalls. So that's another thing that we saw. We have a section about minimizing your lawns. Numerous reasons. Again, we just talked about the root systems. You compare tree roots and shrub roots of 2 to 4 feet to grasses which are 2 inches. So I think you can see the difference, the importance of the root structure, getting the water down into the ground again. Also, as I mentioned earlier, when we have the lawns, you tend to have lawn care practices, and people tend to, people take pride in their lawns. I have one. A lot of that's because we have our septic system and you don't want to have stuff growing over it, but people do take care of their lawns and pride in it. But we're saying, we want to minimize that, and your lawn care, when you do your mowing, mulch it. You don't need to put fertilizers on if you mulch your grass, because you have enough nutrients in what you cut to allow the grass to grow, and we don't need to add anything else. We don't need to change what's there. Also, take a look at native grasses. They are accustomed to this area. They're acclimated to these soils and to these weather conditions. When we bring in the non-native mixes, we tend to have problems. And that ties into the native plants too, which I know that you guys focused on in your rain garden. Those are accustomed to this area. Those are used to the freeze, thaw cycles of the winters, the harsher winters. And it's important when we start bringing in native plant or non-native plants, then we got to start taking a little bit more care of them, adding some nutrients, adding some fertilizers, and that's going to result in problems. We have a section on fertilizers and pesticides in here. 1 pound of fertilizer can create 500 pounds of algae. So I think that shows you what the concern is, and we're seeing algae everywhere. We're seeing it, all the way up north in the Hart Bay area, all the way down to the south end of the lake. So we're seeing that problem.